how do you become a Buddhist? It's one of the questions that I'm asked most often in the comments to my videos, and I'll try to give you an answer coming right up. I'm Doug Smith of the Online Dharma Institute, that's onlinedharma.org, where I try to teach courses on early Buddhist Dharma from a contemporary perspective to help you understand what the Buddha taught. If you're new to this channel and interested in living a wiser and a kinder and a calmer life, consider subscribing to the channel and click the bell down below if you want to receive notifications when I come out with new videos. How do you become a Buddhist? Now, there are various ways to answer this question depending on which school of Buddhism most interests you. There are different kinds of perhaps ceremonies or things involved in various schools. And it also depends on whether one wants to be simply a lay follower, as many of us are, or if one wishes to become a monastic, which is of course a much more serious and life-changing kind of decision. Now, my own background, my own, if you like, affiliation is as a secular practitioner, and so my own answer, that is to say the answer from my own approach, is going to be somewhat different from the answers to other schools. But I'm going to try to give you a general answer because I know some of you are interested in being secular and some of you are not. Now, to begin with, certainly lay people of whatever background are free to attend virtually any Buddhist meditation or service or chant or whatever that you find in your local temple. And now, of course, if you have a question, you can always ask. Sometimes there are, let's say, initiation periods or like a little class that they'll give you for an hour for newbies who don't really know, let's say, how to behave properly within the Zendo, if it happens that you're interested in Zen. Because there are certain kinds of ways you're supposed to behave once you enter the actual meditation room. You're supposed to hold your hands in certain ways. You're supposed to bow before you enter, and those kinds of things. And simple things like that they'll generally give to new practitioners. But again, this depends upon the school. Now, when you go to a meditation or an event like this, as I say, any layperson is welcome to be there. And in general, they're going to involve things like chants. Again, depending on the particular school that you're in. Chants such as the 3 jewels, chants such as the 5 precepts, or chants such as the 4 Bodhisattva Vows. Now, these are typical chants of the kinds that you might find in many Buddhist centers, that they will invite everybody there to chant in unison. And they'll give you usually a little paper thing with the chant written out on it in case you don't know it. Now, what are these chants? The 3 jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And traditionally, Buddhists are said to take refuge in these 3 jewels. You take refuge in the Buddha, you take refuge in the Dharma, that is to say, the Buddha's teaching, and you take refuge in the Sangha. The Sangha being the group of monastics, or the order, or the group of people who are awakened, whatever. Now, the 5 precepts, on the other hand, are the 5 ethical strictures. Now, I've done a video on the 5 precepts. I'll put a link to it down in the show notes, probably easier that way. But basically, the 5 precepts are not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to commit sexual misconduct, and not to abuse intoxicants. And many Buddhist orders will chant these 5 precepts at the beginning or at some point in their service as simply a reminder of what these precepts are. And finally, there are the Bodhisattva Vows, which are chanted in many Mahayana kinds of Buddhist centers, such as Zen centers. And these it's translated variously depending on the center you're at, but one common translation that I found on the internet recently is, creations are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless, I vow to perceive it. And the awakened way is unsurpassable, and I vow to embody it. And I think it's pretty clear that these 4 Bodhisattva vows have a certain paradoxical flavor to them, in the sense that they seem like things that are impossible to achieve, and yet you're vowing to achieve them. And in all of these cases, the cases of the 3 jewels and the 5 precepts and these vows, there's going to be a range of interpretations of how we are to take to them? What do we think about them? What does it mean, for example, to take refuge in the Dharma or the Buddha or the Sangha? What does it mean not to steal or not to kill or not to abuse intoxicants? What does it mean to vow these kinds of things? And this is where I think our own personal background and our own personal interpretation comes in. The various teachers will have their own interpretations that they will generally give if you want them to. But in my experience, most Buddhist teachers allow a broad range of potential interpretations. It's basically up to you to try to find some kind of inspiration in the various chants that you're giving. And if you find them inspirational, then you'll find it inspirational in however you happen to do. Now, as I say, these are chants that you will generally do in a group. They're done every time that they get together, or at least very, very often, so there's nothing specific about you perhaps being a new member. You're going to just join in. If they do these kinds of chants, they don't always. Not every kind of center does these kinds of chants. For instance, insight or vipassana centers, they do much less of this kind of thing than they do in other kinds of centers. But there may be other things involved as well. There may be other ceremonies that a particular kind of school would like you to go through if you want to become a fully fledged, even a lay member. And that's something that you would have to research for yourself. If there's a particular school that you're interested in, you might want to research them online or go to the local center and ask about these kinds of things, because of course they'll be very happy to tell you what's involved, if anything is involved at all. And in general, for instance, in popular sort of Zen centers and so on, there really isn't anything else involved for a lay practitioner most of the time. Now, it goes without saying that much more is going to be involved if what you want to do is to be a monastic, if you want to ordain as a monastic. There's way too much for me to go into here, especially because each school has their own idea of what is involved with that. I'll put some links down below in the show notes for a couple or three different schools, and some beginning, anyway, background about what is involved in those. Basically, they involve a number of different rituals and taking on of robes, wearing robes, perhaps changing your name, perhaps shaving your head, and undertaking all kinds of additional monastic vows. This is not the kind of thing that I think most of us are going to be interested in, but it's good to know at least that it exists, even if it's simply to know what other people have gone through who are in those robes and with those shaved heads around you. But the heart of the matter, at least for me, is the resonance that we have or don't have with the Dharma. That is, with the essential teachings of Buddhism. That if we have that kind of resonance of the heart with these kinds of teachings, that's what really matters. For example, the teaching that all things change, that we ourselves are constructs that are continually in a process of flux, that who we were yesterday is different from who we are today and who we will be tomorrow, that there is no perfect refuge within daily life, that all parts of the world that surround us are to one degree or another imperfect, that they're prone to change, they're prone to decay, that good events now will cease to be good in the future and be replaced by other events, and so on. These kinds of essential teachings in Buddhism are really the heart of the matter if it comes to becoming a Buddhist in some sense. The basic causal idea here is that we have cravings. We crave for security. We crave for permanence. We crave for positive kinds of experiences in life. And these cravings can never ordinarily be satisfied. No matter what we get, we're going to crave more. And so what we come to find by doing Buddhist practices is that there are other practices we can do to try to minimize these cravings over long periods of time. That when we do these kinds of practices, our ordinary cravings tend to diminish over time, that we become more open to the change of life. We become more equanimous with the vicissitudes of change. And indeed, one of the primary things that we crave is identity, is identification. We crave our own identity. We crave our own identification with other things. So we think about a team, a sports team that we identify with, that we crave their winning certain games or popular games. We crave our country. We think of ourselves perhaps as patriots, as somebody who is on the side of right in our country and against the side of wrong, either within or outside of our country. We crave identification with our families, that we're the good family as opposed to other people, or at least we are our own family, which has its own benefits. These kinds of cravings are natural in life. They're part of what keeps us attached to parts of the world and what eventually can produce sadness and disappointment when things don't go as well as we might want. And wanting to become a Buddhist is another form of craving, another form of identification, subtle identification. So I would submit that that's something also that you should investigate, that you should look into in your own lives. Try to think about what is it about being a Buddhist, using that title, that name, that attracts you? Is there a way to disentangle yourself from these kinds of names, from the practices that may make you feel like you're identified as a particular kind of person? As a secular practitioner, I'm more interested in the motion of your heart towards the ideals of the Dharma rather than towards particular labels. Because to me, it is the heart of the Dharma that really makes the thing important, that makes the most importance in being a Buddhist, is understanding the importance of the Dharma and the ways in which it can make our lives better. So to me, it's the practice that's most important, more than anything else, and certainly more than labels. But I think it's also important to know, in case you're interested in this, about the various schools of Buddhism to which we might identify, or at least where we might go for help, or to try to find more about the Dharma, because there are various different approaches around us in the world today. And I did an earlier video about the 3 schools of Buddhism, which I'll put a link to up here on the screen. I'd recommend taking a look at that. I hope it's useful to you. Thanks so much to all my patrons over on Patreon. Many of them are named down below. And I hope we'll catch you on the next video. Meanwhile, be well.